Well, good evening. Welcome to the June 10th meeting of CONA, the Sarasota County Council of Neighborhood Associations. I wanted to let you know that the meeting's being videotaped. We videotape most of our meetings, every one that we can, and we post it on our website after the videographer has posted it on his blog. And once it's posted to our website, there'll be a link right on our meetings page. And then you need to go look at our website, because we've got a lot of pages of resources that are information about not only the meetings that we've held, but other topics related to government and neighborhood issues. We also show on our meetings page an annual calendar, which, although it's not absolute and sometimes is subject to change, it'll show you what we have planned for the rest of the year. And at the moment, we've got the possibility that another water issue will be held here in September. There's an organization starting up that's the Conservation Voters, and they have a group that they've organized which is called the Underwater Homeowners Association. And it's an attempt to make a statewide initiative to deal with the issues, rather than everybody taking a bite out of a different apple in a different place. And I'm hoping that they'll be here in September. We're working on that, and I'm not entirely sure whether they've got the date free, but we'll see what we can do. On October 14th, we're going to have representatives from all of the local governments, the municipalities, plus the county and the state extension service, to talk about our local planning for sustainability, sea level rise, and climate change. And at the moment, it looks like all of the municipalities will be participating. On November 11th, we'll have our 58th anniversary party, and you can get an invitation and even pay online on our website. And in December, we've scheduled a neighborhood concerns about short-term rentals, which is an issue that I think a lot of neighborhoods are worried about. We're in the middle of a members drive. There are invoices and applications over on the table. If you're here representing a neighborhood, please take an invoice and our reasons for joining in case your neighborhood doesn't belong, and submit it to the officers of your association. Okay. I'm going to dispense with some announcements. Some people who haven't been able to be here this evening or have no real strong activity going on. And I'm going to ask Ben Cannon what the status is for the Bath and Racket Club.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Cannon. Thank you. I'm president of the Riverwood Court Homeowners Association, and I'm also a real estate agent, and I'm an advocate for smart growth in our community. So I like CONA very much, and I'm here tonight just to briefly tell you just a little bit about my area. You may be familiar with where Trader Joe's is. Traffic count back in 2016 was 54,000 cars at that intersection, one of the busiest intersections back in 2016. So we all can imagine it's even more now. The plan is from Bath and Racket Development Corporation, not its club members. I want to make sure that is clear. This is really a developer initiative here, that they want to change drastically that area. They're proposing a comprehensive plan amendment change for a 85-foot tower of condominiums, as well as 180 units total, maybe a little bit more. They also want to gain access to School Avenue. So just as School Avenue is being closed for the safety of the kids there in the city, down where we're at, they want to gain access to push their cars into our neighborhoods. And I think that our neighborhood residential streets are not the answer to new traffic impacts. So I've created a Facebook site where you can go for more information, South Sarasota Strong. You can join there for just a plethora of information. I also have a petition that you can sign in opposition. Now, keep in mind, I'm in the county. This is actually a city-zoned matter. So this is going to be an action that we'll have to take to City Hall. And I hope in the future, when that day comes, that you'll come and support our community there as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. All city municipalities exist in the county, and they pay their largest taxes of the residents are paid to the county. So no matter the fact that you're living in the city, you need to really pay attention to what goes on in the county. The next person that I would like to have speak is Susan Shockley, and she's with the Mayaca Community Club.
Thank you. As she said, I'm Susan Shetley. I'm with the Mayaca Community Club. I'm also with the East County Homeowners, Inc., which is a citizens group out in the eastern portion of Sarasota County. We're trying to get the county to preserve the rural heritage properties out east. The community club has filed a comprehensive plan amendment to change the hamlet designation on the county's 2050 maps from hamlet to rural heritage. Rural heritage would keep it at the 1 dwelling unit per 5, 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres. Hamlet, as is currently authorized by the county, is 2 dwelling units per acre, so it's a substantial increase. And there's a proposal in the works to double that and make it 4 dwelling units per acre. So we're trying to get it in there with a positive story and a way that the community can come forward and talk about the quality of life, the benefits to all Sarasota County residents from the rural area. Many people go out there to bird, to fish, to ride horses, 4-H kids raise their cows and pigs out there. You've also got a lot of aquifer recharge that happens in that area, and a lot of quality wildlife habitat equipment, sorry. So what we're asking is for people to support that the county process our amendment, because it was a citizen-initiated comprehensive plan amendment, which has never been done in Sarasota County before. The county has to decide that it's going to make it its own proposal. So on June 20th, the Planning Commission will meet to determine what their recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners is going to be. I've got some cards here that have Planning Commissioner members on the back, Board of County Commissioner members on the back. We have a website, sarasotacountry.net, not Sarasota County, but sarasotacountry.net. I'm also going to send around a petition if people would be willing to sign it. All we're asking for right now is that the county process our amendment, let their staff perform the analysis, look at the pros and cons of the 2 development patterns, and allow public hearings where the community can provide input and comments. Thank you. Around, and yellow cards will be at the table over there if you want to take one when you leave. Thank you.
Next, Tom Matrullo on Celery Fields Fresh Start.
Yes, it's great to see so many people here tonight for this occasion. Clearly, people are concerned about water and water quality. we've been advocating for a few years now to plan sensibly around the celery fields. And if you are familiar with the celery fields, you are aware that the celery fields acts as a giant kind of cleansing agent for the canals and waters that move from East County down through Philippi Creek to the bay. They pause at the celery fields and sort of get refreshed, and they drop their nitrogen. Steve Swaz at the back of the room and he helped build the celery fields. He helped design it. So, Steve, if I'm saying anything inaccurate, please, never mind. Anyway, two bits of quick news. One, we have heard just the other day that one of the commissioners would like to put affordable housing on one of the public parcels at the celery fields. This comes out of nowhere. It's not part of any plan or any discussion. It just kind of popped up. But Chairman Hines is determined to try to get the board to agree to this by July 22nd. I would try to be watching this very closely. Another completely different view of the celery fields has also emerged in June, coming from the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast. They are looking at a much broader and longer range plan that involves not just the quad parcels, which are public, but the entire celery fields, also public, plus lands to the east. And they're calling this a rural heritage conservation area, 1,300 acres, that could be the Central Park, as people often like to say, of Sarasota. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to invite Debbie Osborne from the Conservation Foundation to come up and say a few words about her plan. Thank you.
I'm Debbie Osborne, Director of Land Protection for Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast. And folks who don't know Conservation Foundation, we are a regional land conservation organization. We save land, we save it forever, and we don't get involved in specific land use decisions. What we do is we work with willing sellers who are interested in conserving their land to find a way to do that. So in this concept of the celery fields in the greater rural heritage conservation area, where the quad parcels are the western edge, we now have an opportunity at the eastern edge to save a 24-acre piece of property called Graceland that is right on Palmer Road, where a developer was looking to build about 42 homes. Whether it could get that, that's up in the air. But what we were able to do is get the property under option, actually a contract to purchase it by January, and that would then hold the line from the type of more high-density development that's south of Palmer Road to be able to protect this rural heritage conservation area. So Conservation Foundation, as I said, has a contract. We need to raise $2.5 million to be able to save the land and purchase the land, and we see this as a community effort. I have information about our effort, and there's more information on our website. Anyone who's interested in learning more about our work, please find us on conservationfoundation.com. But this piece of property, community members came to us. It extends from the quad parcels, celery fields, big cat habitat, to Graceland, which is a horse ranch where there's therapeutic children's horseback riding and things like that. It's, again, a community asset. The neighborhood asked us to work with them to help create this larger area. So any help, we would appreciate it. And as I said, we have a very short time frame to keep this from being developed.
Are there any audio experts here? Our microphone took a dive off of the stand. Okay, thank you. Our subject tonight is red tide and algae blooms, environmental causes and human health consequences. And Larry Brand is going to be our speaker. He is a professor at the University of Miami, He has his PhD degree from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute of MIT. And he has a long list of research that he's been doing on this topic. And I'm going to introduce him because I know you want to talk to him and hear what he has to say and ask some questions. If you have a question, you must write it down on one of these index cards. And if you want an index card, raise your hand and someone will bring you an index card. And then when you finish, they'll give you a pen too if you need it. When you finished writing your question, please raise the card and somebody will come back. And I'll be sifting them or sorting them into, into categories and asking the best questions that are related to. A lot of times we get duplicate questions. So if you would please welcome Larry Brown.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be standing here, so I'm not here to call some people there.
You have to hold the microphone close to you.
Okay. Okay, first of all, I'll just point out both red tide and blue-green algae are both types of algae. Scientifically, we call blue-green algae cyanobacteria. I'll try to say blue-green algae, but I might forget to call them cyanobacteria.
You have to speak up.
Still can't hear. Even louder. Okay. Can you hear now?
Yes.
Okay. This is really close. Okay. Basically, if you pointed out, is we start out with excess nutrients. That leads to these harmful algal blooms. These produce toxins, which then affect the health of humans. That's basically the scheme I'll be looking at tonight. And basically, the problem we're facing is we're trying to feed 7.5 billion people on this planet now. That takes a lot of fertilizer to generate all those plants. And the plants on land are basically, they evolved from the algae in the ocean. They basically have the same needs. So whether it's algae in the ocean or plants on land, you need nitrogen and phosphorus in basically a 16-to-1 ratio. I want you to remember that number. It's become important in a second. Okay? And you fertilize your crops on land, but when you fertilize the crops, it's not 100% efficient. Some of it runs off, and that fertilizer runs off into your local streams and then eventually into the ocean, and you generate these algal blooms as a result of that nutrient running off. Okay? To the extent that we eat the plants, okay, this ends up in sewage, and again you have that nitrogen phosphorus in your sewage. And a lot of times that sewage then is released into our waterways, and again that will lead to your algal blooms. So not surprisingly, you look around the world, your major harmful algal blooms tend to be downstream of your major agricultural areas or your major urban areas. Now if you look at the ocean, 99.9% of the ocean, you see that nitrogen phosphorus in that 16-to-1 ratio, and I won't go into why that is, okay? But in certain circumstances, in coastal waters and on land, those ratios get altered, okay? Plants need nitrogen phosphorus in 16-to-1 ratio, but if you alter it, let's say we start out with a 32-to-1 ratio. For some reason, I'll explain why this happens in Florida, okay? The plants take up nitrogen phosphorus in a 16-to-1 ratio. So what happens? Use up all the phosphorus, you still have 16 nitrogen left over. Okay, what that means is if you add more nitrogen now, it's not going to do anything. The algae can't grow anymore because they're phosphorus limited. Okay, if you add more phosphorus into that water, you will get more algae. Okay, so basically ecosystems where you have a high nitrogen phosphorus ratio, they're what we call phosphorus limited. Phosphorus is the nutrient you need to be worried about. That's going to cause problems. Okay? If you start out on anything with 16-to-2 ratio or an 8-to-1 ratio, what are you going to run out of first? You're going to run out of nitrogen first. You're going to have leftover phosphorus. So it's a nitrogen limited ecosystem. And this is very important because still, a lot of our public officials still do not understand that concept. This turns out to be really, really important, as you'll see. Okay, this here, the colors indicate abundance of algae in South Florida. My color scheme is blue is low abundance of algae and red is high. And this is very peculiar because you've got almost 3 million people living here right along the west coast of Biscayne Bay, and you have low abundance of algae. Now, I'm not saying it's pristine, but on the scale I'm using, it's relatively low. Okay. You come down here to Florida Bay, right here in north central Florida Bay, out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, this is Everglades National Park. Okay, and there's a few people in the Keys, but basically out in the middle of nowhere, you have this massive algal bloom, and it turns out it's blue-green algae. What did I just say? Most of your algal blooms are downstream of your urban areas or agricultural areas. Yet here we have this massive bloom developed in the 1980s out there in the middle of Everglades National Park. So that was a real puzzle. So that's what I'm going to focus on first, because once you can figure out what's going on with that, what caused that, and it continues today, then you can figure out what's going on upstream. So I'll start out with Florida Bay and then I'm going to work my way upstream. Okay, and basically then that stimulated me. I started out working in Florida Bay, but since then I've expanded my studies all throughout various parts of South Florida. Okay, so that's a close-up view of the algal bloom, the blue-green algae in north central Florida Bay. Okay, and something very peculiar, because if it's sewage or fertilizer, your nitrogen and phosphorus are going to be showing the same spatial pattern. But if you look in Florida Bay, you see high phosphorus in western Florida Bay and high nitrogen in eastern Florida Bay. The fact that those two nutrients are in different places, that right there tells you you've got two different sources. You've got a phosphorus source in one place and a nitrogen source someplace else. That's probably not fertilizer or sewage. Okay, this just shows that these blue dots indicate a nitrogen and phosphorus ratio greater than that 16:1 ratio. Okay, which means you're a phosphorus limited ecosystem. Phosphorus is going to be the problem. But as you move over to the western side, these red dots indicate a ratio less than 16, so that's going to be a nitrogen limited ecosystem. Okay, and that 16:1 ratio is right here in the middle where that bloom is. Okay, where you're mixing nitrogen from the east with phosphorus from the west. That's the chemical data. We then have biological data, and what I do is what we nutrient bioassays. There's some complexities with the chemistry, but basically the biology confirms that in fact that the algae over here are in fact phosphorus limited, and the algae over here are in fact nitrogen limited. Okay, so basically the hypothesis here is where phosphorus in the west, where it meets the nitrogen in the east, where they meet together, that's where you get the big bloom. Okay, so now we want to figure out where the sources are. Okay, well this is actually the hardest one to figure out, that phosphorus. That phosphorus should not be there. And the reason for that is that South Florida is really this giant limestone mountain sitting in the middle of the ocean. And basically it's well known that there's a chemical interaction between calcium carbonate, limestone, and phosphorus. That limestone chemically binds up the phosphorus. So if you take seawater that's in that 16:1 ratio, the limestone is going to suck up the phosphorus, leaving the nitrogen behind. So there shouldn't be any, and many studies have shown this, not only South Florida, elsewhere where you have a limestone-based environment. Okay, so that was a big puzzle. Where is that phosphorus coming from? Well, it turns out, I won't go into details, but the source goes back millions of years ago in the Miocene. You had an unusual oceanographic event north of Florida, up in the Carolinas. And subsequent, there was an uplift of the Appalachian Mountains carrying those phosphate deposits southward. And as you folks all know, you now have these high phosphate deposits east of Tampa Bay. Okay? And they started mining those phosphate deposits about a little over 100 years ago. Started out just right at the surface with picks. And over time, these mines got larger, and now they have these huge mountains of waste, essentially radioactive waste that they don't know what to do with. And you can see these by satellite, all these blue rectangular areas, that's the mining area in there. And of course, that drains down the Peace River. And of course, sometimes they have little accidents because they use sulfuric acid, which dissolves limestone, and they generate these giant sinkholes. There's a helicopter for scale. Okay, now that radioactive waste goes down to the aquifer. So it was one of my first hypotheses for the source of phosphorus. But turns out, for a number of reasons, that's not the source. I'll give you one example. If you go to Everglades National Park, there's a bunch of isolated ponds, lagoons, and lakes, and so on. And they're not connected to the ocean, okay? And what you'll find is in the eastern side, you see low phosphorus. In the western side, you see high phosphorus. That phosphorus can't be coming down the Peace River from the mines down the west coast of Florida, down in the western Florida Bay. Okay, there's got to be another source. And basically, these are isolated ponds. They're not connected to the ocean. Okay. What I found looking at some unpublished geological data is those phosphate deposits are at the surface up there east of Tampa Bay, continue on underground all the way down the west coast. And they hit the coastline in two areas down here, 10,000 Islands area and western Florida Bay. And they're about 50 feet below Florida Bay. And you can see it matches pretty well where you see high phosphorus. You see high phosphorus up here and down in here. Okay? And of course also in these ponds right in here. Now the question is, how do you get that phosphorus from 50 feet below up to the surface? Well, it turns out we have something called geothermal circulation here in South Florida because of the rather unique geology. And the core of the earth is very hot. And the heat comes up toward the surface. It heats the water. Remember, Florida is this giant porous limestone mountain sitting in the ocean, basically. And so you heat up this water, hot water is going to rise. So you can sort of think of the Florida Peninsula as this pot of boiling water, just extremely slowly. And you all know about warm mineral springs, little salt springs, and there's a bunch of offshore springs and so on. That's the process. So basically the hypothesis is that this water's coming up through those phosphate deposits, bringing the phosphorus up to the surface, which would be why you see that good match, spatial match between the phosphorus in the surface waters and those phosphate deposits below. And we tested that, don't worry about the details, but basically measure helium in groundwater. Helium is a byproduct of the radioactive decay series from uranium-238 to lead-206. It gets trapped in groundwater, and basically we were able to show excess helium in Florida Bay, indicating yes, indeed, you do have this groundwater coming up into Florida Bay, bringing that phosphorus up. And basically, the bottom line is, as a result, over here where limestone dominates, you're going to be a phosphorus-limited ecosystem because the limestone sucks up the phosphorus. So for that reason, the Everglades and Biscayne Bay are phosphorus-limited. But once you shift over here where those phosphate deposits are, you shift over to nitrogen limitation because you have this high level of phosphorus naturally there. And this continues right on up the west coast. And that's just nutrient bioassay data showing over here you've got phosphorus limitation, and over here you've got nitrogen limitation. So nitrogen is going to be the critically important nutrient to worry about on the west coast here. Okay, so basically we know where the phosphorus comes from now. Now what about the nitrogen? That's the other half of the story. In other words, that phosphorus has been there for millions of years. But we haven't had those algal blooms for millions of years. The algal blooms in Florida Bay didn't start until around 1981 or so. Okay, so we have to look at the other half of the story, that's nitrogen. Well, it matches quite well with salinity. Notice this yellow here indicates fresh water coming out of the Everglades. The Everglades floods into the eastern part of Florida Bay, not the western part. Okay? So now let's work our way back upstream. Here's Lake Okeechobee, here's the Everglades agricultural area, which is mostly sugarcane, down to the whole canal system, all the way down into eastern Florida Bay. Okay, that's the transect we're going to look at.